This is your Sound Off Extra review for WWE Summerslam 2018, possibly for the final time in Brooklyn, New York. They are going to be in Brooklyn for WrestleMania weekend next year, which means next summer they're going to be somewhere else. Toronto, perhaps. That's the rumor going around. But SummerSlam is in the books, and overall, there's a lot of question going into this show. It's a stacked card in terms of the number of matches, long show. And of course, we had that excellent NXT TakeOver show the night before. I don't want to compare the two because they're two totally different shows. One show is a hell of a lot shorter than the other, 5 matches compared to I think 13. But I thought this show overall, on the whole, was a thumbs-up show. It was not perfect by any means, but I do think that there was more good than bad in terms of the matches, but also in terms of some of the stories, had they played out. A lot of stories here that are far from over, that are going to be continuing. Some finishes that were frustrating. There were a couple things on this show I wasn't really happy with, but I can't really sit here and complain about too much stuff. I thought overall it was a pretty good effort. We get into it right away here with the Kickoff show. Now, I will say this about the Kickoff show. This thing turned out to be a complete, colossal waste of time. This Kickoff show was completely useless. It opened up with Andrade Cien Almas and Zelina Vega against Rusev and Lana. I was bummed that they opened the show with this match in front of a half-empty arena. This was like an empty arena match. But to their credit, Brooklyn, the fans who were there, they were pretty loud. And so if you didn't really, it kind of darkened the crowd a little bit. If you weren't there, or if you didn't really look hard and you could see all the empty seats, they were loud enough to where you wouldn't have known that the building was as empty as it was. So the people who were there were pretty vocal for this. Match was pretty basic. Lana was in control. When Almas got up on the apron, she went over and slapped him, but Zelina Vega rolled her up, and it was hilarious because obviously they were a little farther away from the ropes than they had planned to be. But what was supposed to happen is Zelina was supposed to get her feet up on the ropes, but she's so short, her legs couldn't reach the ropes. But finally, the referee, just before the referee counted 3, Zelina got her feet up on the middle rope just at the last second. So it didn't look completely ridiculous. And no Aiden English in this match, even though they kind of teased it before the show. He came up to Lana and Rusev and was talking about how he wanted to make it up to them and help them. And of course, they said no. And he never did make an appearance here. I would assume we're going to get a rematch. If I know WWE, we'll probably get a rematch of this on TV this Tuesday, and we may see Aiden English at that point. And if they do the match on Tuesday, it'll be in the same building. Hopefully, it'll be in front of more people. But half-empty buildings are pretty much the norm for Smackdown tapings, so they'll probably feel right at home if that's the case. But Cien Almas and Vega get the win. It was the right move. I had them in my predictions. I thought they should win, and they did. We had Drew Gulick and Cedric Alexander for the Cruiserweight Championship. Nothing really wrong with this match in terms of the work they put in. They worked hard. I mean, they were busting their ass out there, but just, the crowd it was like a silent film for most of this match. They just didn't really care aside from a few high spots here and there, and there really wasn't a whole lot to get into here. Cedric hit a standing Spanish fly. Then the two of them traded roll-ups and pin attempts, and one of them got botched, and they tried to kind of make up for it really quickly. But Cedric ultimately on one of these roll-up attempts got the 3. He folded Gulick up and got the pin. Look, it was what it was. There really isn't a whole lot else to say about it. This was not the most exciting showcase, I don't think, for the Cruiserweight division. And the quiet crowd, which again, probably a half-empty building here, that certainly didn't help them. Last match on the Kickoff here was the B-Team defending the Raw Tag Team titles against the Revival. Revival hit a shatter machine right away on Curtis Axel, but Bo Dallas was the legal man. So I thought the match might be ending right then and there, but unfortunately it continued. And they worked over Bo's knee for a little bit. Finish came when Dawson had Axel pinned with a cradle when Dash Wilder snapped Bo Dallas's neck on the top rope. And he stumbled backwards into the pin, and that caused Axel to be rolled up on top of Dawson for the fluke win. If it sounds convoluted, it kind of was. This sucked. I was hoping the Revival would get the belts. They would do the switch and give them a run with them. I mean, besides the fact that the people I wanted to win didn't win, I just think the match was nothing special. That's why I say it sucked. So who knows? Maybe they'll win the titles tomorrow night. This company is very fond of rematches, even though it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when they give challengers who lose another match. Like the champion, I can understand, but we see a lot where the challenger loses and they get another match and another match until eventually they win. And then what does it mean, right? If you keep getting shots, eventually you're going to win. But yeah, hopefully they will get a rematch in this case because this was awful. And to go back to my original point here, this entire kickoff show was a giant waste of time. I just don't understand the purpose of putting together a kickoff show like this. I mean, I understand if they want to have the banter with Renee and Booker and Jerry Lawler and all of them, but, you have all these matches on the kickoff show. I would think the purpose of that would be to get people excited for the pay-per-view. I thought that was supposed to be the point when you have these kickoff shows, but apparently not. Pay-per-view itself opened with Terry Crews narrating a video package. This got me pumped up. Pretty much anything with Terry Crews gets me pumped up, but not as pumped up as Brian Dawkins' NFL Hall of Fame speech did, but this was pretty close. The show opened with Seth Rollins with Dean Ambrose, Psycho Dean, Prison Dean Ambrose in his corner, challenging Dolph Ziggler with Drew McIntyre in his corner for the Intercontinental Championship. Match started pretty slow. First, 5 to 10 minutes, I'd say. But then it slowly built. They built to a reverse superplex spot. This was insane. I don't know that I've ever seen this in a match before. So he hits, he has him basically in a reverse position for a suplex. So think of the old Goldust curtain call. And so he executes that off the top rope, which is crazy enough. But then after landing, Rollins immediately rolls through, still holding on to Ziggler, face under armpit, and he lifts him up into the air for a twisting slam. Great near fall there. They got a standing ovation from the crowd for that. Rollins somehow got busted open pretty badly in here. I didn't see how it happened. It may have been on the impact, maybe on the landing of the move. I'm not sure. But he was bleeding. The referee was putting the gloves on. McIntyre jumped up on the apron. By this point, Dean Ambrose, who had confronted him a couple of times earlier, he had seen enough. And he yanked McIntyre off the apron, gave him dirty deeds on the floor. Dolph was setting up for a super kick while Rollins was distracted here, but Rollins caught wind of it, and he landed a super kick first. He beat him to the punch, hit the curb stomp, and he wins the championship. So Seth Rollins, once again, the Intercontinental Champion. Very good opener. Very good opener with the right finish. There was no Ambrose turn. There was no hint at an Ambrose turn or any dissension or anything like that. There was no miscommunication. But I still think it's coming sooner rather than later. It could happen on Raw, or maybe they want to drag it out for a little bit. But Dean is looking awfully angry, even tonight, right? I mean, he wasn't really showing any outward signs of being upset with Seth, but he's got this pissed off look on his face. So I think it's coming. We had an interview with the Bella Twins backstage. Oh, joy. They were plugging all their shit. They were plugging Total Divas and Total Bellas and Birdie B clothing. I think it's a clothing line or something. I don't know. Some stuff they were promoting. And Nikki had to cut off Brie because Brie kept interrupting her. This was awful. This was just horrendous. And they said they were going to be ringside. They wanted to be ringside for Ronda Rousey's match to watch her make history. And my first thought was, oh, God. Please no. They were foreshadowing that they may somehow get involved, I guess, by them being at ringside. Plus, Meltzer claims that the planned main event right now for the Evolution pay-per-view in October is Ronda Rousey against Nikki Bella. And this is one of those times where I'm hoping he's wrong. But yeah, Ronda Rousey against Nikki Bella in the main event of the first ever women's pay-per-view. Gag me now, is all I have to say about that. Of all the matches that you could do and have in the main event, Ronda Rousey against Nikki Bella is not my idea of a main event for this historic pay-per-view. We had the New Day challenging the Bludgeon Brothers for the Smackdown Tag Team titles. When the match was over, it was very disappointing, but the match itself really wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad match. It was actually pretty wild for a little bit there. But then came the finish. So we had Big E. He early on, he tagged in. He was suplexing Rowan and Harper, belly-to-belly suplexes on the outside. He was throwing these guys around like they were nothing. We had Xavier Woods at one point doing a flip dive out onto Rowan. Big E did, of course, his big dive through the ropes to Harper, landing on his shoulder. Keeps tempting fate. But I'll say this much. I've been saying that for years. He's been doing that for years, and he has yet to get seriously injured. So what do I know? But you give it time. It'll happen. Kofi Kingston, he was not wrestling tonight. It was the other two, but he was at ringside. He was celebrating when Eric Rowan gave him a back body drop on the floor. Big E hit the big ending on Rowan. And we had Big E and Luke Harper fighting on the apron. He gave a Uranage that... now, this was interesting, what he did here. So basically, they were out on the apron. And I think what they were trying to do, they were sort of stalling. They were out on the apron. I think Harper had Big E until Big E kind of wiggled out of it. But they're on the apron. I think they were waiting for Xavier to come over. He was out of position. He was still selling or recovering from a move. And Big E was going to do, I want to say it was the big ending. I was actually paying too much attention, I guess, to the match. I wasn't writing notes as much while I was watching this part. But I think the idea was that Xavier would kind of be down below on the floor, and Harper would fall, and he would land on Xavier's knees, but he really didn't. So he was kind of out of position, and it really didn't look that good. But anyway, Xavier ended up on the top rope. He was going to do his elbow drop onto Luke Harper, but Luke rolled out of the ring, and so Woods said, well, that's not going to stop me, and he decided to give the elbow to Harper on the floor. Huge elbow drop from the top rope down to the floor. And they set up for the midnight hour for the finish. Eric Rowan, though, he grabbed one of those giant mallets that they bring out to the ring with them, and he used it as a weapon on Xavier and Big E for the disqualification. Fans were not happy with this finish. I was not happy with this finish. But the idea here, the story here, is that New Day gave them the biggest run for their money yet. They were the Bludgeon Brothers' toughest challenge to date. They got desperate. They had to resort to using weapons in order to keep their titles, as ridiculous as it is that Paige, the general manager of their show there, lets them bring giant hammers down to the ring with them. What a great GM she is. So yeah, I mean, it made for a really lame finish, but it keeps the feud going. Obviously, this is going to extend to at least one more match between these two. It's a means to an end, I guess, but a very disappointing way for this thing to end. And not only that, but this was the first of multiple DQ finishes here on this show. One is bad enough. When you have more than one in two different championship matches, that's a bit much. We had Braun Strowman against Kevin Owens for the Money in the Bank briefcase. This thing didn't even go 2 minutes. This was a total squash. Strowman steamrolled him a couple of times outside. Owens always takes these great-looking bumps. I feel bad for the guy, but, I mean, he just gets turned inside out on these things. He took two huge bumps from Strowman on the outside, the running shoulder tackles. He gave Owens, that is, a disgusting chokeslam on the metal ramp. He actually bounced. Kevin Owens bounced off of this ramp. Hopefully his head didn't bounce. But that looked brutal. And Strowman threw him back into the ring, gave him one power slam, and pinned him. That was it. Just like that. And all I can say is, I hope they give Kevin Owens hazard pay for all the bumps that he's taken for Braun Strowman these last 3 or 4 months. He has literally risked life and limb with all of these bumps and angles and crazy stunts that they've done. The big fall off the cage at Extreme Rules, and now, even the chokeslam bump here. And it's insane what this guy has been putting his body through. He's been making Braun look like $1 million. You would hope for him there's some kind of payoff to all this in the end. I guess we'll see. But this was horrible. This was terrible. And I actually said to myself, I'm going to reserve judgment on this until the end of the show in the event that Owens comes back out to cost Strowman the Money in the Bank. And he never did. Now, he still might. But for tonight, at least, this was just terrible. This was awful. We had Carmela, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte. Triple threat match for the Smackdown Women's Championship. This was better than I expected. Carmela was actually better than I expected her to be. I don't usually expect much. But there was actually the most shocking thing about this was we had a very scary-looking Carmela dive through the ropes to the outside at one point. I've not seen her do a dive before, but everybody else does, so I guess she felt like, I don't want to feel left out here. Maybe I should do one. And thankfully she didn't kill herself on that. But the other scary thing, and by the way, it was on Becky Lynch. that she hit that suicide dive. So they're outside the ring, and now Charlotte has to get in on this. She climbs up to the top rope, hits a corkscrew moonsault from the top rope out to the floor, completely misses the two of them. As most of the time when I see Charlotte hit these moves, she barely grazes her opponents. It looks great as she's flying through the air, but she's going to kill herself for somebody else one day. So she hits the corkscrew. Thankfully, she didn't get hurt. But I have agita whenever I watch Charlotte up there, especially when she's doing it out to the floor. So back in the ring, we have Becky Lynch putting Charlotte in the disarmor, trying to tap her out. Carmela comes in to break it up. There was a lot of this towards the end, a lot of broken up pinfalls, near falls here, people running in at the last second to break up the pin. Carmela tossed Charlotte out to the floor and hit a super kick. Becky Lynch put her in the disarmor. Carmela reached the ropes, and Becky gave an exploder suplex to her, put her back in the disarmor. So she's got Carmela in the disarmor, right? Carmela's ready to tap. All of a sudden, Charlotte comes back, and she hits natural selection on Becky Lynch and pins her best friend, and basically steals the championship away from her. This was Becky's story for months. I've talked about this, the great low-key build-up for months. She started winning matches. Nobody was really talking about it. Nobody really picked up on it until about a month and a half ago. After so long of doing nothing and losing and losing and losing, they consciously began to build up Becky many months ago. And I figured, well, hopefully it's building to a storybook ending where she takes the championship at SummerSlam from Carmela. And then Charlotte came back, and they inserted her into the match, and now she's the champion. And, that's the story they're going with. The fans were not happy with this finish at all. They booed the shit out of this finish. They hated that Charlotte won. They were fully behind Becky in this match. And even when Becky, initially hugged Charlotte, she embraced Charlotte, the fans were booing. And then she lowered the boom. Then Becky just lost it. She turned on Charlotte. She viciously attacked her. Got her out of the ring, and she threw her into the barricade, and she tossed her over the announce table, and Charlotte landed badly. So she beat the hell out of her. And I'm just watching this saying, they turned Becky Lynch heel, or tried to anyway, in Brooklyn, of all places. So of course she got cheered louder. Of all the things on the show tonight, this may have been the thing that got the loudest cheers. If it wasn't the biggest thing, it was easily one of the top two things that got the biggest reaction of anything on this show. Was Becky Lynch beating the shit out of Charlotte, the new babyface women's champion, when this match was over. And they had to know that would happen. I mean, we can question why they do the things they do. They're not completely stupid. They know the market. They know the crowd they're in front of. They had to know this would happen. They had to know that everybody watching this would empathize with Becky Lynch. The fans even chanted, "You deserve it," at Charlotte. Charlotte is crying. She's in tears. She just got her ass kicked. And the fans are chanting, "You deserve it," at her. As they should. As they should, because she absolutely did. She had it coming. That was my feeling coming out of this. She got exactly what she deserved. Good for her. So I guess the idea here is Becky's a heel, I guess. And it's ridiculous because she should be a babyface. I actually think these two are completely miscast. It should be Charlotte as the arrogant heel and Becky as the babyface. I had a clip on the channel here a few weeks ago, and I posed the question to all of you. I said, is Charlotte Flair the Roman Reigns of the women's division? And you know what? After this, if this reaction is any indication, and I know this is just Brooklyn, maybe it'll be different in another city, but if this reaction from this crowd is any indication, she may well be. She certainly got a Roman Reigns reaction tonight. She was the babyface that got booed out of the building. Charlotte was one of the biggest heels on the show. Now, on the bright side, it does keep Becky Lynch in the title picture for a while, and probably makes that, I would assume, the SmackDown Women's title match at the Evolution pay-per-view in October. So if you are a Becky Lynch fan and you are very upset, that is the reaction that they are going for. They are telling a story. They want you to be upset that Becky was basically screwed out of the championship here. And, she'll be in the title picture. She may end up even with the title. I don't know. I mean, I still feel like they're going to keep these titles on Charlotte and Ronda until WrestleMania and then match them up. That doesn't mean Charlotte can't lose the title and then win it back. But at least Becky will be involved, still in the title picture for a while, so that's a plus. But boy, if they came to Brooklyn and they thought doing that finish that crowd was going to react any differently than they did, then these people are brain dead. That's all I have to say. We had AJ Styles and Samoa Joe for the WWE Championship. This was the match I was looking forward to the most here on this show. Now, Joe comes out, and before the match starts, he grabs the mic, and he introduces AJ's wife, Wendy, and his daughter, who are sitting at ringside, not in the front row, a few rows back, but there they are. And Joe just says to Wendy, "Daddy's coming home." Joe is great. Joe looked a little gassed during a good part of this match, but I still love him. He's still one of the best they have, especially on the mic. I just said this earlier today on the podcast, actually, in terms of the best talkers in the company right now. Heyman's not really a full-time performer, so I mean, you could count him if you want to, but I think it's easily Samoa Joe. I don't think there's anybody even close. But AJ has his own retort after Joe says this on the mic. He says, "Yeah, you're right. I brought my family with me. They came here to watch me kick your ass." So that was a fine way to start the match, right? Personal rivalry, going after the man's family. You figure as soon as this bell rings, AJ is going to just beeline for this guy and tear him to shreds. The bell rings and the match starts, and what's the first thing they do? AJ goes for a test of strength. Because I know that if my opponent mocked my wife and kid at ringside, I'd want to show that I was stronger than he was. That was the only stupid thing about this match that I thought was really dumb. You have a personal, grudge match feud here, and you open with a friggin' test of... That'd be like opening with a collar and elbow tie-up and a bunch of rest holds. You know what I mean? It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit the story of the match. We had loud TNA chants from the crowd. I just remember all those stories when Vince McMahon was ringside on Raw many years ago for the Trump versus Rousey match. Remember that debacle? And he was serenaded by chants of TNA from the crowd, and then I read afterwards that he was incensed. He was so angry about that. The fuck did you expect, dude? You have two impersonators rolling around the ring, and the fans would rather see actual wrestling. I can't imagine why Vince would have been upset about that, but he was. Fast forward, about midway through the match here, AJ goes for a Styles clash on Samoa. Now, AJ had a little bit of trouble getting Joe up a few times here. Joe is no small man. And so he went for, of all things, a Styles clash. And he only got one arm hooked. He did get Joe up, but he couldn't hold him there for very long. And that could have ended really badly. I was, briefly terrified. Because you could tell AJ couldn't hold him up. He was losing him. And so instead of putting him back down and trying again, he just went for the move. Now, if Joe wasn't ready... Right, because Joe's turned upside down. He can't necessarily tell if AJ is losing him or, what his facial expression is. If his head's not tucked the right way, this could have been a really horrible ending to this move. Thankfully, it wasn't. It looked nasty, but it turned out okay. A couple minutes later, Joe gives the sign for the Muscle Buster. He teased the Muscle Buster. He didn't hit it. He didn't even get AJ up for it. But he did tease it. AJ resisted, and so Joe, instead, he delivered a kick to the side of AJ's head. AJ took a nasty spill out to the floor. Joe threw AJ face first into the steel steps. This is where AJ got hurt. I mentioned earlier Rollins got cut hard way and was bleeding, and I don't know how it happened, but here, obviously this happened when AJ went face first into the steps, and I think he had a gash on his head. Is where the blood was coming from. But he got opened up pretty good. Now, while he's down on the ground, before we even can see that he's all bloody and hurt, he's down. Joe gets on the mic again, mid-match here. He stands up on the announce desk, and he turns to AJ's wife in the crowd and says, "Hey, Wendy, I made you a promise. Daddy was coming home. It looks like he's not, but I'll be your new daddy." What a fucking great line that was. Everybody reacted to it. What a great line. So then we get the shot of bloody AJ rising to his feet, all pissed off. He darts over to the announce desk, jumps up onto it, tackles Joe through the barricade by the timekeeper's area. The whole thing collapses inward. Then AJ starts knocking down different members of the production crew, the ring crew. He grabs a chair. he just lost his cool here, and he started beating on Joe with the chair. Referee calls for the bell for the DQ. Fans boo. Again, they're not happy with this disqualification finish. But this was I guess maybe a lame ending. I guess it's lame, but it's not. In this case, this didn't bother me, right? There are some times when they do these lame endings, DQ or a draw or a count out. And rarely do I think a match should end by count out. There are times for it. But there are other times where it makes sense. And this was one time it didn't bother me because I could see the story that they're telling here. But the fans were not happy when the ref called for the DQ. I thought this was an excellent match, though. I did. I thought this was great. Bloody AJ Styles fighting, to protect his family, I think is just such a great story. It made for a great visual. AJ goes into the crowd, and he goes over to his wife and his daughter. I don't know how old his daughter is. She can't be that old. She's very young. And so obviously she's not smartened up to the business because AJ went to go hug her, and she just looks at him and goes, "Daddy, you're bleeding." Man, that hit me right in the feels, man. That hit me right in the feels. And actually, AJ was trying to, hold her, and she didn't want to be with him. She was probably like looking at this guy going, ew, like you're bleeding all over the place. So his wife took her back, and AJ didn't know how bad the cut was. He turned to somebody and said, "Is it bad?" And they said, "Yeah." And so he took his wife and daughter, and they hurried to the back. But I thought this was great, and it gets them to Hell in a Cell next month. It keeps the feud going. One of the big issues I have with Hell in a Cell, and I've talked about this for years, there are some gimmick pay-per-views that I'm cool with. Money in the Bank is obviously a big show, and that's fine. Elimination Chamber, that's a good gimmick, I guess. But Hell in a Cell, to me, was always one of those gimmick shows that I thought was completely unnecessary and completely counterproductive, because Hell in a Cell is the kind of match, it's the kind of stipulation that should be saved for a match or a feud that warrants it. It should not be a case where, it's September, it's October, it's time for Hell in a Cell. And it was worse back then. At least now Hell in a Cell is in September. All those years of Hell in a Cell matches with that stupid pink rope. I always thought that didn't fit. But I always hated the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. I still do. I still hate the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. I like the match, but I hate the fact that it's a pay-per-view. And because it's a pay-per-view, even if you don't have a feud like AJ and Joe, which totally fits the bill, we got to do one. We got to do Hell in a Cell. Well, here we have a match that actually warrants it. This is a personal vendetta here. They're going to build this thing up for another 3 or 4 weeks. And this is a match that actually warrants the Hell in a Cell stipulation. Now, I only hope it is a Hell in a Cell. Maybe it's not. I don't know how many Hell in a Cell matches they're going to do. They may only do one. And if it's not this, it could be a Raw match. I think this is the one, though. This is the Hell in a Cell match. Frankly, that should headline that next pay-per-view. I won't hold my breath on that. This was probably the 4th or 5th match down on this card. But we'll see. But I love this. I thought this was great. What was decidedly not great is what came next. Elias was supposed to perform at the Gramercy Theater. Very late notice. Earlier in the week, they announced that Elias was giving a concert in Manhattan at the Gramercy Theater. He was going to perform his greatest songs. They sold tickets for this thing. And then came word a couple of days ago that the event was canceled. And the story is that, WWE officials wanted Elias to perform on the grand stage of SummerSlam. And I said on the podcast earlier, maybe it was low ticket sales, but I would not be surprised if we come to find out that concert was never even supposed to really take place. And they just announced it as a gimmick and to make him feel even more special, and then say, no, we're going to hold off until SummerSlam and make it a bigger deal, and they'll just refund people their money, which is what they did. Okay, so here we are at SummerSlam. Out comes Elias on stage. He's going to give us a concert, or he's going to sing a song. He goes to play his guitar, and the guitar breaks in half. So he throws a temper tantrum, and he walks to the back. And that was it. There was no Bobby Lashley. There was no other person who came out. He didn't ask for a replacement guitar. He just left. And we never heard from him again. Now, on the one hand, I'm grateful because this fucking pay-per-view is long enough as it is. This really wasn't necessary, but again, a giant waste of time, kind of like the entire Kickoff show. This should have been on the Kickoff show. It would have fit in nicely. A giant waste of time. They should create a new pay-per-view. Replace Hell in a Cell. Get rid of Hell in a Cell and have a new pay-per-view and just call it, WWE Presents A Giant Waste of Time. I could think of a few pay-per-views so far this year that could have used that name. We had Daniel Bryan against The Miz. This match has been 8 years in the making, and I really liked it. I thought it was good, but sadly the crowd was quiet for a lot of it, and I'm sure part of that was the placement. I can't imagine if this match... It's hard to say what the perfect place for it would have been other than the opener. I think the opener would have gotten, good heat no matter what. This was right in the middle of the show, but you can't necessarily lay it all on that. So whatever it was, the fans were not as into this match as I thought they would be. They were at other points, but there was one point, I don't remember after what the spot was, but they were both down. It was scary how quiet it got. I mean, it was like a Japanese crowd. You couldn't hear anyone like talking or cheering or chanting or anything. It got like somebody had witnessed some horrible accident in the arena, and like a hush came over the crowd. That's how quiet it got. And there were a couple of different points like that. Early on, Miz executed his own version of a surfboard. Credit to him for trying. Didn't really work out too well. Bryan got out of it pretty easily, and then he showed him how it's done with his own surfboard. He did it the correct way. So there were, a lot of kicks here. Obviously, Miz has been doing the yes kicks for a while now, and so he threw his kicks, and Bryan would throw his kicks, and kick. Gets a little tiresome after a while. But we had Miz giving Bryan kicks, and Bryan started to no-sell them. In fact, he was leaning into them. And finally, Bryan catches Miz's leg. He starts slapping him over and over again, just repeatedly slapping this guy. And gives him a dragon screw, leg whip. He hits Miz with another kick, and Miz ends up catching Bryan for the skull-crushing finale for a near fall. So then we see Maryse is at ringside, and she's very concerned for her husband. Bryan's throwing more kicks at Miz. They're out on the apron. Miz moves out of the way. Bryan kicks the ring post, makes a nice thud. Miz gets him back in the ring, immediately puts him in the figure 4 leg lock. So Bryan is selling this thing. Eventually, he reverses the hold. Miz makes the ropes. Bryan puts the yes lock on. Again, Miz makes the ropes. And so now Miz is outside. He is over by Maryse. And Maryse is checking on him and making sure her husband is okay. And then you can tell that she hands him something. We can't see what it is. I'm pretty sure it was brass knucks. But at first, you can't really see what it is. But clearly, she hands something to him. Well, Bryan's in the ring. And he's about to do a dive out to the floor. He goes to do a dive, and as soon as he makes it to the ropes, Miz reaches up and punches him right in the face. Knocks him out. Miz goes back over to Maryse, whatever the object was, hands it back to her, scurries back into the ring, and Miz gets the pin. And so after all of this talk now, for months, of Daniel Bryan saying that he is just dying to punch Miz in the face, the match ends with Miz beating Daniel Bryan with a punch to the face. It was the right finish. I said when I did my predictions, watch for the wives to get involved. I was half right. I at least was 50% right on that. But it was just a great heel move by Miz. It was exactly what you would expect somebody like Miz to do. He had to cheat to win. There was no way that Miz could go in there and get a clean win over Daniel Bryan if they're going to keep this thing going. It just doesn't fit his MO. You knew that if he was going to win, it was going to be because of interference or because he would cheat in some way, and that's exactly what he did. Miz and Maryse both. The perfect combo. I hope we get her back on TV. She has been sorely missed. So maybe we'll start to see her a little more often on TV. But despite the dead crowd at different points during the match, I liked the match a lot. I thought the match was really good. And it keeps the feud going, assuming that Bryan doesn't leave and he does re-sign his contract. He just said the other day, 90% sure he's going to re-sign. My lawyer is looking it over. So barring any last-minute surprises, he's going to stick around, and so this feud is going to continue. They promoted the Undertaker versus Triple H match. They gave this thing a video package, as if this show isn't long enough. Why couldn't they do this on TV tomorrow? This had to be tonight. We had to see this now on this 6-hour show. Yeah, we got a video package. Like it's 2012 all over again for Triple H against the Undertaker at that Australian Super Show on October 6th, so happy birthday to me. And they're promoting it as a last time ever match. That's the tagline here, last time ever. Nice try, WWE. Nice try. The last time we saw these two, you called it the end of an era. Now it's the last time ever. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You're not fooling me this time. These two are going to be dragging their decrepit bodies out there in about 20 years from now. And they're going to have another match. So I don't believe for a second that this is their last match. This is their last match until their next one. We had Finn Balor against Baron Corbin. For the first time since TLC last year, we got to see Demon Balor. So the fans loved this. They went nuts for it. Balor just dominated the entire thing. This lasted all of 90 seconds. Drop kick, sling blade, clothesline out of the ring, running dive by Balor. More drop kicks into the barricade outside, and a coup de grace for the win. This late in the show, 90 seconds is about all I could take, anyway, of a Baron Corbin match. And he's not bad, but, at 10 p.m., it's like, come on, let's move things along, This was very short, but this was exactly what it needed to be. Of all the matches on the show, this was one of the few, believe it or not, to get a "this is awesome" chant. And obviously that was all due to the demon gimmick. But going into this show, who would have predicted that, right? Who would have predicted that Finn Balor against Baron Corbin of all 12 or 13 matches on the show would be one of the few to get a "this is awesome" chant? But there it is. But it was also the second squash on the show, on the SummerSlam card. I mean, I know Brock squashed Cena a few years ago, right? It happens sometimes, but two on the same show. That's a bit much. We had Jeff Hardy against Shinsuke Nakamura for the United States Championship. Crowd was pretty dead for this. This is what happens when you insist on having these long marathon shows. This is what happens, and I feel bad for the guys because the matches were good. It's not anything that they did. That's why. Yeah, there's going to be people who say, oh, you can't blame Bryan and Miz and the dead crowd just on the, show being long. Bryan's a vanilla midget and people aren't excited. I don't, it's like these shows. Have you ever been to one of these shows before? Like a WrestleMania or a SummerSlam? I don't blame the crowd. You sit there and you're just subjected match after match, throw in the video packages, throw in this and throw in this backstage segment, and Elias throwing a temper tantrum, and now it's 10:30 at night. You've been sitting there since 5 if you got there at the beginning. It's a long fucking show. And so these guys that are in the later matches, unless you're in the main event and it's an exciting main event, these guys are in a horrible position here because what can they do, right? Short of killing themselves. So when the shows are so long that it really affects the crowd reaction to the matches, it affects people's enjoyment of the matches because it just feels like, everyone is dead and there's nothing to get excited about. So I think that these two suffered from a lot of that here. Hardy hit a swanton bomb. He hit a twist of fate first. And he was going for a swanton bomb, I should say. Nakamura rolled out to the apron. And Hardy decided, in his infinite wisdom, that, you know what? I'm going to hit a swanton bomb out here on the apron. So he hits a swanton bomb. Unfortunately for him, Nakamura moved out of the way. And Jeff Hardy landed on the apron, took a horrible bump. He tried to grab the ropes on the way down to sort of break his fall. It didn't really work out too well for him. He kind of flipped over, landed on the floor. Nakamura threw him in the ring, hit an axe kick, hit the Kinshasa, and got the pin. Jeff's been giving interviews recently talking about how bad his back is. His back is really bothering him. His body is not feeling too great these days. And so he can't do the swanton bomb anymore in every single match. He used to do it in every match. And he doesn't really do it on the house shows anymore. It's kind of just a TV thing. And even then, he's trying to phase it down. So I just read this like a few weeks ago. And then here he is on this show. And what does he do? It's not just that he does the swanton. He's like, I'll do it on the apron. That's a smart move. So Randy Orton's music hits. He slowly walks down to the ring. Has he ever walked down to the ring quickly? I think slowly is the only way he knows how to walk down to the ring. So he's slowly making his way down to the ring. Nakamura is gone. He disappeared. Hardy is down. He's laying on his back. Orton gets down to the ring and he stops. And suddenly he turns around and he walks to the back. And that was it. We never heard from him again. So I guess once he got to the ring, he realized that he had already earned his SummerSlam payday just by showing up. And so he decided to turn around and leave. Smart man he is. We had Ronda Rousey and Alexa Bliss for the Raw Women's Championship. This was one of those matches on the card I was looking forward to out of sheer curiosity more than anything else. Natty was out there. I wasn't sure if she was going to be there tonight. She was. She came out wearing her father's jacket. Jim the Anvil Neidhart's jacket. The same jacket we were told that he wore the night that the Hart Foundation won the tag team titles from Demolition at SummerSlam in 1990s. That's pretty cool. The Bella Twins were shown at ringside, which I was very worried was a foreshadowing of bad things to come. Thankfully, it turned out to not be too bad, but Rousey came out looking like she may have actually been bitten by that bat that was flying around her last Monday. What the hell was up with that makeup? It looked like she was in mid-transformation into Batgirl. I don't know what that was all about. And she had new gear, too. But this was the third squash on this pay-per-view. I just got done talking about Balor and Corbin. We had, of course, Strowman and Owens. And then this. Now, two of them at least made sense. Balor should have beaten Corbin quickly, and he did. And Ronda should not have spent 10 minutes like Nia Jax did at WrestleMania selling for Alexa Bliss, and she didn't. The one that upsets me, though, still is the Owens one. That one, there was no reason for that. So Alexa tried to stall, and she was running away, and Rousey was like, look, I'll give you my back. Here, I'll sit down on the mat, I'll close my eyes, and I'll let you come in and do whatever you want to me. And so Alexa comes in, and she immediately tries for a choke, of all things. And it had no effect at all on Ronda. Ronda no-sold it, and then she gave her some judo throws, very violent judo throws. And, fireman's carry, spinning fireman's carry, slam. And so she grabs Alexa's arm. And this is the moment that I've been waiting for a couple of months now. I figured what they were waiting on is SummerSlam. And they were going to have Ronda, quote-unquote, break Alexa's arm, and Alexa does the whole double-jointed thing, and it'll make for this grotesque visual, and what a badass way, right, for Ronda to win the championship, and that's exactly what they did. Now, I don't think the visual was as gruesome as it has been before. I mean, when Alexa's arm, when she has her arm go out, I remember the first time she ever did it, because she's done it twice. The first time, I think, was in a match against Becky Lynch on Smackdown. And they zoomed in and got a close-up shot of that thing, and that looked just fucking nasty. They didn't get as good of a visual, I think, on it as maybe they should have. But, Ronda was bending the arm in a disgusting way, and then finally she put her in the arm bar, and Alexa immediately tapped out, and the place went nuts. And the thing with Ronda is, and I saw this last night, I was at that TakeOver show in that very same building. I was sitting at ringside a few rows away from Ronda, and I was watching her. Sometimes I would turn, I would see her. She was sitting next to frickin' David Arquette over there. And every time I looked over, she had a big smile on her face. She was marking out, she was cheering for people, and she was just having the time of her life. And she looks that way almost every single time she comes out there. Sometimes she comes out and she has to be pissed and mean. But typically she comes out, she got a big smile on her face. She's waving to the crowd. And she just always looks happy to be there. And she looked legitimately elated. Legitimately moved to win the championship here. She celebrated in the ring with Natty. Then the Bellas came in to leech off of her and got booed. She ran over and made out with her husband, Travis Brown, at ringside. She kept saying, "This is for Rowdy Roddy Piper." She said that out loud a few times. It was a very cool moment. A very cool moment. The thing that's, I think, easy to like about Ronda, because there was a time when I just thought Ronda was one of the most unlikable UFC fighters or performers. And I figured that one day she'll make a great heel. Because, I don't know, her attitude about certain things, and she didn't really take losing very well in MMA, and she just came across as very unlikable. Ever since she's come to WWE, I'll say this much, it's been the complete opposite. I don't really think she comes off that way now at all. I think she comes off as totally likable. And I think that's one of the reasons why things have worked out for her as well as they have, in terms of the way the fans have reacted. Obviously she was going to get pushed to the moon no matter what. But a big part of the reason why she doesn't go out there and get booed like an outsider is because the people know, A, she's a real fan, which she is, and she's got respect for the craft, and she's legitimately happy to be there. And it shows every time that she is. So there was no turn, there was no swerve. Natty didn't attack her, and the Bellas didn't do anything to her. And we'll see if it ends up being Nikki and Ronda at the Evolution show. Obviously, the Bellas are coming back. They're back to promote their reality shows, since their reality shows are coming back next month. So I assume that's the reason why they're back. But this was exactly what it should have been. And then it was time. Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. We had a CGI big dog for Roman's entrance. This was horrendous. Now, you remember when they were doing all the graphics on SmackDown? Kevin Dunn was going graphic crazy for a while. They don't really do it as much anymore. They go through these phases. Well, they had some CGI graphics at different points during the show. And for the main event, they didn't have one for Brock. They didn't give Brock one. He was the champion. He didn't get CGI. Roman Reigns did, though. So, and I took a picture of it, too. I put it up on my Twitter. It's the most ridiculous-looking thing in the world. I just laughed my ass off when I saw this. So Roman comes out. He gets exactly the reaction you would expect. He gets booed out of the building. Brock comes out. He gets booed as well. So, good job. You've got a match here with two people that the fans absolutely hate. So before the match can start, Braun Strowman's music hits and the place erupts. He comes out with the briefcase. He gets on the mic. He says, "I'm not going to cash in like a coward behind someone's back." He goes, "If I'm going to go toe-to-toe with you, I'm going to do it face-to-face." Now, I thought, as many of you probably did, that he was out here at the beginning to cash in and it was going to turn into a triple threat. Instead, he said, "I'm going to stand outside the ring, and whoever the winner is, I don't care who it is, you're going to get these hands when the match is over." And I saw some people on social media saying, "Well, this doesn't make any sense. He came out and he was going to, I'm not going to be a coward." And then he decided to stand outside. The whole point of this was he wasn't going to be the kind of Money in the Bank winner who, cashed in on somebody when they were down on the mat and half dead after their match. He was going to give them fair warning of what was coming so it wasn't a shock. And then he was going to cash in and win. So I get it. I understood it. It's fine. So he stood outside for the entire match. Right out of the gate, Roman hits 3 consecutive Superman punches, 2 spears. He goes for a third. And Lesnar catches him for the guillotine choke. In the middle of all this, these two guys get a "you both suck" chant. Roman goes for a spear. Lesnar dodges the spear. And Reigns instead flies out of the ring. He takes out Braun Strowman. Lesnar follows him outside. He sees Braun is getting back up to his feet. He picks up Braun, gives him an F5 on the floor. Now, when Brock tried to get back into the ring, Strowman reached up and grabbed his foot, wouldn't let him inside. So Brock took the Money in the Bank briefcase and he began pounding on Braun Strowman with it. And Brock Lesnar chucked the Money in the Bank briefcase, I don't know how many feet. He probably should try shot put or javelin. He'd be pretty good at it. But he tossed that briefcase all the way to the very back of the stage. And I'm pretty sure it killed some of the LED lights. Once the briefcase hit, I think he knocked a few of them out. So then Lesnar grabs a chair and he just abuses Strowman with it. And he takes the chair into the ring with him. And as soon as he turns around, he goes to use the chair on Roman. Roman is waiting in the wings, hits a spear. And it was funny because the chair basically landed on Brock's face and he had to push it away. 1 spear is all it took to get the 1, 2, 3. So after all this time, remember, Brock's been champion since WrestleMania of last year. So the man's been champion for a good year and a half. I don't know, 500-something days maybe it's been as the Universal Champion. And just like that, with 1 spear, Roman Reigns vanquishes the Beast. He slays the Beast and wins the Universal title. Vince McMahon makes the Guinness Book of World Records in the process with the longest case of blue balls in modern history. He finally got to reach climax here tonight. There's a visual for you. He got what he wanted. And you know what? I'm glad. I'm glad he got what he wanted. I'm not glad that Roman won the title clean because it doesn't do much for me, but I'm glad that we finally got this out of the way. All the teasing, all the matches and the rematches, and oh, Vince changed his mind, and they're worried about the crowd, all the bullshit. Just, my attitude was, it's going to happen, just do it. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Just rip it off and get it over with so we can move on. So I'm glad that he got it out of his system finally. And make no mistake about it, his plan in having Braun Strowman come out when he did and announce that he was going to cash in after the match, and he was going to stand outside the ring for the match. That was their way of making sure that people didn't walk out, that people didn't shit. Not that I think people would have been walking out in droves. I mean, people say they're going to do that and they never do. But it's like the people that say, I'm canceling WWE Network. How many of those people do you think actually canceled the network, right? I mean, come on. If they did, that might actually send a message to the company if you're that upset. But people just don't do it in large numbers. It just doesn't happen. But to make sure that people didn't shit all over the match and there weren't beach balls flying around all over the place, although there was something that went on in the crowd at one point. I don't know if it was beach balls or what. But make no mistake about it, that was their plan. It was obvious. It was patently obvious. That was their plan. And having Braun come out and announce that and stand outside because they wanted the fans to think that, hey, we're going to get a Braun Strowman cash in and a Braun Strowman title win. All we have to do is just sit patiently and wait for this match to be over. Only, it never happened. It never came. Roman won the championship clean. They showed a replay. There were some cheers, mostly boos, but there were actually some cheers for the finish. And they were very careful not to show much of the crowd, and they faded to black and went off the air. And we never heard or saw Braun Strowman again after that F5. And after Brock beat him down with the briefcase and beat him down with the chair, that was the last that we saw of Braun Strowman. And so now the question is, does Strowman cash in on Raw tomorrow night? I say he does. And Kevin Owens ruins his cash-in. And Roman ends up keeping the title for a while. Because the way I look at it, if they didn't take the championship off him tonight, if the idea was, they're worried about the crowd reaction, and so we'll have Roman win, but then we'll have Braun cash in so people go home happy. Well, that didn't happen. Roman is going to bed tonight as the Universal Champion. He's going into Raw tomorrow night with that title. And if they didn't take that thing off him tonight, after the win, I don't think they're taking it off him tomorrow night either. And if Owens doesn't end up costing Braun the title, which again, I think he almost has to, then shame on WWE for the way that they treated Kevin Owens here tonight and used him on this show. Unless it leads to something, how they use Kevin Owens tonight is inexcusable. And I know there's going to be some people listening to this who don't really care because Owens is at this point a mid-card, or who cares. It matters because, he at one time was actually a Universal Champion, believe it or not. And he is one of the, upper players really on that Raw brand, and can be again. And he's done a hell of a job of, trying to make Braun Strowman look like a gazillion dollars over the last few months. So if his payback or payoff for all that is what they did to him tonight, and it really doesn't lead anywhere, that's just wrong. I don't know what else to say about it. It's fucked if that's the case. Which makes me think that may be the road they're going down with him costing Braun the cash. Because what better way for him to get the ultimate revenge on Strowman than to cost him his, money in the bank? Right? That just seems to be the most logical conclusion to this. Unless you just want to kill Kevin Owens dead altogether, which they kind of did here tonight. So, that was it. That was your SummerSlam card. Some questionable decisions. Some underwhelming and disappointing finishes here. In most cases, though, it was done for a reason, that being to extend the feud. And I have no problem extending the Miz and Daniel Bryan feud. I have no problem extending the AJ Styles Samoa Joe feud. I thought Styles and Joe was the best thing on the entire show, particularly what they did there at the end, with the family stuff. And it, unfortunately AJ got hurt, but I thought the blood actually added to the whole thing. So that to me was my favorite part of the entire show. And that Samoa Joe line was just fantastic. But you should never have a pay-per-view like this with, 3 different squash matches. And, they had the 2 DQ finishes and the 2 different title matches. The pre-show is a complete waste of time. Not a perfect show, but I can't give this show a thumbs down. It was a thumbs up show. Some people are not going to like hearing that. Some people are going to have a lot to say in the comments section. I want to hear from you guys. If you disagree or if you agree, whatever. Or what do you think is going to happen tomorrow night? Do you think Braun's going to cash in? What's going to go down? Leave comments in the comments section down below. I want to hear from you guys. If you would be so kind, give this video a thumbs up as well. I would very much appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to vote in our poll. As a matter of fact, let's do that before we head out here. We have the typical post-pay-per-view Twitter poll that I put up immediately when the show ended. And so let's take a look at what you guys thought of SummerSlam. Last I checked, we already had a pretty good response here to this poll. So let's see where it's at now. As of right now, and the show's been over for about 45 minutes now, yeah, we've got almost 3,000 votes already. 58% thumbs up, 42% thumbs down. So there you go. Not by a huge margin, but the majority of you gave the show a thumbs up. So there you go. That just backs up what I just said. Overall, this was a good show, just with some really frustrating parts to it. And the one thing I will always say this, I know I sound like a broken record, I don't care. These shows, I know they try to make them out to be like a big deal. WrestleMania is a long show, so let's make SummerSlam long, and let's make Royal Rumble long. These shows are too fucking long. And it's not just for the fans that have to sit through them. It affects the matches down the card. I'm sure that there are guys on that roster who dread what their placement is going to be on these shows because, you get to a point where it's just people get tired. Where they're just saving their energy for the main event. And meanwhile, these other guys are out there killing themselves and people are sitting on their hands. And we saw a lot of that tonight. I wish the promotion had more respect for its own performers because stuff like that and stuff like, throwing out, they had that mixed tag not long after 5 o'clock. You have Andrade Cien Almas out there and Rusev out there, and the building is about 80% empty. Yeah, that happened once to The Miz. Miz was part of some kind of tag team opening match on the Kickoff show. This was last year, I think. It might have been SummerSlam last year. I don't remember, but he was offended. He was legitimately upset because they were out there performing in front of nobody. So it would be nice if the company had a little more respect for its performers. And you know what? If that means cutting down the length of the show and the number of matches on the card, then so be it. Because there's no reason for these shows to be so fucking long. I'm sorry. That being said, it was a good show. Let me know what you thought. Follow me on Twitter at Solomonster. And I want to give a shout out to Salrex at Salrex on Twitter for the great artwork as usual. You can download full episodes of the podcast each and every week. It goes up every Sunday. We have episode 560 just went up earlier today. Talking about NXT TakeOver last night. The Hulk Hogan story, him putting his foot in his mouth again. And the whole Dave Meltzer, Peyton Royce thing. We talk about all that stuff and the death of Jim Neidhart. So you can download the full shows on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean. It's available on most major platforms. So until next time, be well, stay safe. I will see you back here for more YouTube content very soon. Until then, take care, guys.